You know what? Every week I fuck something up and I'm doing all the switching between everything. Welcome everyone to the Galactic Podcast. There are people here. It wasn't just a blank screen, I swear to God. Last week I pressed the outro button instead of the intro button, so it's all good. I'm not sleep deprived one little bit. I'm on the ball and we're ready to go here tonight. Welcome to the Galactic Court Podcast. We're here for a new episode, a new week, and a new show to be discussing. Technically an old show, I guess, but a bit of a revival, or it's been born again, if I may be so cheesy as to say. But we're going to be here this week to discuss the first two episodes of Marvel's Daredevil Born Again. Super psyched that this show is back. Of course, I have an absolute superstar to be here to discuss the episode. You've seen him before, you know his face, you know exactly how good of a guest he is, you know exactly how good his podcast is. But welcome to the show from Krypton To Alderaan, it's Joey.
Yay, it's me. Wow. Thank you. That's really great. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of that, and I appreciate you having me on. And as we were saying backstage, I don't usually, either on my podcast or other podcasts get asked to talk about anything other than Star Wars. So this is a nice little, it's refreshing. It's a nice little change of pace. So thank you.
No, absolute pleasure, buddy. No, I love having you on for a good chat. Yes, we do normally chat Star Wars. To be fair, you've been on to cover a few Star Wars bits, and we'll be on in the future to cover other Star Wars bits. But it's just in the same way that I was saying that earlier today, I was on Let's Come Rent podcast to discuss Daredevil, and normally I only get invited on shows to discuss Star Wars stuff. So it was beautiful to be on to be as a guest on someone else's show, chatting Daredevil. And so it is great to have you on to discuss something a bit different as well. We've got our first comment as well. So we've got Royish Good Looks. Let's go. Nice. I'm guessing that this is the lovely other co-hosts of Krypton To Alderaan. Would be correct in there?
That is correct. Yes.
Has he got some Royish good looks, or is it just a facade?
He does have some Royish good looks, and also check out his music. He's got some great music on YouTube. Royish Good Looks on YouTube. Some Star Wars music. Check it out.
Oh, nice. Sounds good, to be fair. Before we get into everything, though, if you're not following the Galactic Core podcast already, make sure you're jumping onto the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can catch the episodes live on YouTube and Twitch. Obviously, you can see all the backlog of live episodes and all the previous episodes that I used to do before we went live on YouTube. And obviously, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else where you do get your podcasts, you'll find me on there. This week, though, we are going to be jumping into Daredevil Born Again. Super psyched to get this show back. Before we jump into this week's, or I suppose it's actually Monday now, isn't it? So technically last week's, with the new episodes out tomorrow. But before we jump into that, Joey, the original 3 series on Netflix, The Defenders, that whole corner of the little Marvel universe that's now been brought to canon, how do you feel about those shows?
I loved those shows. I absolutely loved those shows. I loved Daredevil, especially the first season. I gotta say, far and away my favorite of that era was Jessica Jones, especially the first season of Jessica Jones. That's one that I just watched over and over. I really loved that season. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. There were some, it didn't always hit, but like the first season of Daredevil was phenomenal. The last season of Daredevil, I thought was really, really good. So yeah, was a big fan. Not so much of an Iron Fist. That one kind of, maybe they missed the mark with that one a little bit. And Luke Cage was a little bit up and down for me. It felt a little messy. So there, like I said, there were some misses, but overall, I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair enough analysis. Luke Cage up and down. Iron Fist wasn't great, but season 2 was definitely better than season 1. Jessica Jones, I thought season 1 was phenomenal. I thought it kind of went down a little bit as it went on, unfortunately. I don't think Daredevil misses in any of its series, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because season 2 includes Elektra, The Hand, The Punisher, it is up there as one of my favourite individual seasons of TV ever. I'm too big of a Punisher nut, to be honest, to let it go when the Punisher shows up. And he was phenomenal in that series as well.
Yeah.
Some of the talks they have as well, like the rooftop chat that they have, I think it's like in episode 4.
So good.
One of the best chats that I think they've ever done in these types of shows. So
Yep.
and the Defenders TV series. I know not a lot of people enjoyed that. Some people thought it was a bit meh, but I actually kind of rate that quite highly. And if I was rating like each episode of the Netflix shows, I'd have the Defenders probably in the top third, I think. I actually really enjoyed that, and I love the combination of them. Even though it's only 6 episodes long, and it takes them nearly 4 episodes to all of them come together. But when they do, I thought it was great. Like that scene in the I'll tell you what always reminded me of is in the Chinese restaurant, sort of toward, I think it's right at the end of episode 3 maybe, or episode 4, when they're there and Jessica Jones comes back because she throws the car through the window, knocking Elektra over, and she walks over and they all line up. So you've got like, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Daredevil, and even Styx there, and they all line up and they're all getting ready to fight. It kind of reminded me of like the airport scene in Civil War when like each side lines up to go and fight each other. I was like, this is the MCU Netflix version of that in a way. So I did absolutely adore those shows. Daredevil, though, the 3 seasons, and you can even include, I guess, Defenders, because he's obviously plays an important role in that, but where do you rate them sort of first to say, we'll go 4th, we'll include Defenders in there?
Yeah, I think Defenders would be at the bottom if we're rating the seasons of Daredevil. I think I would go 1, 3, 2 Defenders. That's... with the caveat of I did not rewatch them in order to prepare for Born Again. So, but I watched them a lot years after they came out. So my memory is a little bit maybe not current on them, but from what I remember and what I remember about enjoying them, that's my ranking, I think.
Fair. I think, I know these series so well, I didn't even need to rewatch them before watching Born Again, to be fair.
Right.
I knew where we were coming from, and I knew what was going to be going on. So I think it's interesting that I think most people generally consider season 3 probably to be the top one. In a way, that almost feels like a Born Again series, isn't it? Because he's like, we knew he wasn't going to die in Defenders, but he's assumed dead, and he comes back, but he comes back in like the black outfit rather than the Daredevil suit, and he's just goes at it fucking mentally, to be fair.
Yeah.
And then just ending the 3-way fight between Bullseye, Fisk, and Daredevil. And he's like, I beat you, and it's just like so amazing. I think that's probably what gives it maybe the edge over season 1. Especially since season 1 we don't even get to see him in the suit to the end, do we? So I know that was like the whole point of season 3 is he goes back to that kind of attitude, but season 1, I think that's why season 3 maybe gives it the edge over season 1, just because we don't get to see the suit to the end, and then season 3 we don't even need him in the suit, to be fair. He just goes hell for leather. So but I do love those series. Obviously heavy rumours that coming out in the last few days that a lot of the Defenders will be appearing in season 2 of Daredevil, which has obviously just started filming, or already started filming. Is that something you want to see? Do you want to see them having the cameos?
Yeah, I think that's very fun. I think maybe this is a little bit too... This is just me personally, but Marvel needs to do something to bring me back in. Like, they've done a lot of stuff that has kind of pushed me out, with the exception of Loki season 2. And so I feel like they need to do something. And like, these street level superhero things are one of the things that I love the most. So bringing them all back. And like I said, I loved Jessica Jones. I love, John, whatever his name is Frank Castle. I really loved the casting with everyone except the guy that got to play Iron Fist. So I'd love to see them all come back. And Defenders wasn't the strongest thing for me. I would put it like somewhere in the middle of all of the things. So if they could like bring that back and maybe, raise it a little bit more in my mind, I would be all for that. But I do really enjoy the refocus on Daredevil. I mean, it started it all, so it kind of makes sense that they would build back on it quickly, because obviously it was the first of these series to come out on Netflix years ago. So it makes sense. And yeah, I would love to see people come back.
Absolutely. I'd be really excited to see any of them back. I think they've missed an opportunity by already could have had one of them in the new series. We'll get to that in a bit.
Okay.
But right now, though, because it's a Marvel review we're doing, so we, of course, are going to play the worst game in podcast history. Welcome to... It's been a while since I've done this, actually, because I think it's been a while since I've done anything Marvel-related in terms of, like, reviewing a current thing. Although, actually, I did do Captain America recently. But to be fair, I did that live straight out of the cinema. I came straight out of the cinema, me and my friend sat down in the coffee shop and just went live in the coffee shop and reviewed it there and then, like, straight after walking out. So I could probably be forgiven for missing it. But welcome to the return, then, of the worst game in podcast history. It's MCU or Real Life You. So, welcome, Joey. Welcome to the most pointless game in podcast history. The only game designed to try and drive a wedge between people deliberately, just for a bit of fun. The whole point of this game is that I'm going to give you some MCU characters, the real-life actor or actress that plays them, and then we are going to pit them against your co-host Royce and see who you would rather spend the day with. So you can go to the cinema, you can go out to dinner, you can go to a theme park, you can do whatever you want for the day. But you've got to pick between these three people of who you would rather do it with. Like I said, I've had co-hosts on together before, and it's been quite fun to see them argue about whether they would spend the day with each other or not. And most of them, to be fair, don't pick each other because they see each other all the time or chat all the time. Right. So just a little bit of fun though. Royce, if you're watching, it's not meant to drive a wedge between you really. It's just a bit of fun. If you want to chirp it in the comments, you can always say, I'm definitely not spending the day with Joey. I'd rather go off with so-and-so. But,
it's very funny.
Since it's obviously a Daredevil episode, we are going to throw some Daredevil characters at you. So first of all, who would you rather spend the day with, Joe? Would you rather spend the day with Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio, or your co-host Royce?
Oh, interesting. The character, the real-life actor. Ooh, that's a good one. Sorry, Royce. I'm not going to pick Royce.
Well, he's already saying tread lightly. He's already tread lightly, Joey.
I'd love to spend the day with Royce. We don't get to do that very often, maybe like a couple of times a year. So I'd love to do that. But I really love Vincent D'Onofrio. I just like, he's an incredible actor. And just the stuff that he has been in and the characters that he's played and the range that he has is incredible. So I feel like I wouldn't know how to talk to him, but I would still like to spend time with him. But from everything from, like, obviously Kingpin, he's great casting. Like, that's what I'm saying. These shows, these Marvel Netflix shows have amazing casting. He's amazing casting as Kingpin. But from, like, Edgar in Men in Black and the first Men in Black, just like a crazed alien with barely any lines, but just like the facial expressions, to the character that he played in Law and Order, just all across the board. He's just such an incredible actor with such amazing range. I would love to just like spend the day with him and, I don't know, fumble over my words and be like, whatever, just hang out and try to like learn learn more about him and just be around him. Fair. And all of that. So cool. That would be amazing.
Fair. So Vincent D'Onofrio is your pick on that one. I'd probably be scared to spend the day with Kingpin because you don't want to set him off. I don't want to embarrass him in front of Vanessa or anything and get my head squashed in a car door. So
right. I also just a real interjection. I love that that's like a rumor going around New York that actually happened in this show. Yeah. That's just such a good little
nice callback to
it's just series. Really fitting. Yeah.
And we've got a friend in the chat. Brandon from Clan Brandalorian jumping up in the chat. Not the biggest Marvel guy, but jumping on to show a bit of support. Love you for that, Brandon. And obviously you were on Clan Brandalorian very recently as well. Last week, was it?
Just a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. Now, but very, very recently, talking about talking about Star Wars, talking about the Acolyte season 2, what we would want, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, go check that out, Clan Brandalorian on YouTube
Absolutely.
or wherever else.
And we did an episode together last week ourselves where we just had a nice long Star Wars chat. It was beautiful. It was a great episode. Lots of interaction from the audience, which was great. We just sat back. We didn't have any set subject. We just talked about whatever we wanted to. So that was a beautiful chat. You can always go and check that out on either of our YouTubes as well if you want to have just a nice general relaxed Star Wars thing in the background. So let's get back to our little game though. So who would you rather spend the day with, Joey? Karen Page, Deborah Ann Wolf, or your co-host, Royce?
Okay. Sorry again, Royce, but Deborah Ann Wolf. I love D&D, and she loves D&D, and I was just listening to John...
Fair.
What's his last name? I can never say his last name correctly, so it's a sticking point for me. But I was just listening to like his podcast or his video cast where he had her on, and they're talking about a bunch of stuff, but they and like struggles in life, which is very, I mean, you should go listen to it. It's a great episode of a thing. But she's also like talking about D&D and how she's a DM, and she like guides him through a little mini thing, like D&D thing. She's so good at that, and she also seems just like a genuine, cool, sweet person. I would love to spend the day with her, maybe get a D&D session in. I would also just love to learn from her I'm not a DM, but it's something I would love to do someday, and she's really, really good at it. So yeah, and then I could bring everything I learned from Vincent D'Onofrio. I could learn how to act as a character from Vincent D'Onofrio, and then bring that character to D&D with the help of Deborah Ann Wolf, and then Royce and I could hang out after that.
Fair, yeah, it looks like he's
that would be.
He's giving you a bit of forgiveness, isn't he? Like, we can hang out afterwards. It's fine. And I'm going to give you one more. Even Brandon's job, like, poor Royce never gets picked for anything. I always find when I do this particular little game that no one picks their co-host or anything to do it with. So
yeah,
it's. And he's saying it's fair because he doesn't do D&D. Well, I mean, Deborah Ann Wolf can teach you. She taught John Bernthal in the space of like 5 minutes.
It was so good. Just go watch, everyone, like, just go watch that clip. It's so good. She's just so good at it.
Just the last one, our main guy for Daredevil himself. So Charlie Cox, Matt Murdock, or your co-host Royce.
All right, this one I'll go with the actual character. I'll go with Matt Murdock. It would be fun. I love New York City. I've spent a lot of time in New York City in my life, and so it would be just fun to like go around New York, explore Hell's Kitchen with Matt Murdock, the Daredevil himself. I feel like he would know all the good spots. We wouldn't get into any legal trouble, there would be a lot of benefits to going around New York with Matt Murdock. I would love that.
I feel like it could be one of those situations where you both know that he's also Daredevil, so he doesn't have to pretend that he's completely blind or anything like that. So he can just be himself in terms of his natural self and all his abilities, and he can be like, hey, can you hear this? Can you hear what that guy's saying over there? That's what I'd be like. I'd be like, guy in that cafe over there, can you just hear what he's saying? I'd be super annoying with it. I'd be bugging him all day to use his powers.
Is anyone talking about me? Anyone saying anything about me, Matt? Yeah.
But I think that's actually good. I mean, Charlie Cox, I've seen plenty of interviews with him, obviously, because he's British. I've seen him probably more stuff than most Americans, because I've seen him in quite a few British dramas as well. And so I know that his range of acting is good, but I think Charlie Cox is a good guy overall. But I think I would be on you. I would pick Matt Murdock on that one. I don't think I could pass up the opportunity to spend a day with Murdock on that one. Yep. So that's fair. So the score being basically 2 for the real life actors, 1 for the MCU character, and 0 for the co-host on this one. So, Royce, better luck next time, buddy. But that is generally the way it does go with this little game. No one ever picks the co-host because you speak to them all the time. You might see them plenty. So, when you get the opportunity to rub shoulders with the stars or an MCU character, why would you not be going that way? Brandon trying to stir it up as well. He's like, Royce not getting picked. Oh, dear. But thank you for that, Joey. And that brings an end to the worst game in podcast history, MCU or real life you. Now, let's get on to the subject matter for the week. We are here to discuss Daredevil Born Again, episodes 1 and 2 that just dropped last week. So, what were your thoughts? What were your hopes? What were your expectations going into this new series, having seen the trailer, but before we got to see the episodes?
Honestly, I really didn't have any expectations. I was more just curious about how this was going to happen, because it's been years since this all went away, and we didn't know if it was going to come back, right? Or if it was going to come back, if it would be the same cast of characters, or the same cast of actors. Anyway, there was a lot we didn't know for many years. So when this was announced and we got to see some trailers and some footage and stuff, I really didn't have any expectations set. And so I was very pleasantly surprised with what we've gotten so far, with a couple of little maybe pain points for me or asterisks there. But overall, I'm really enjoying it. And it feels very poignant for the actual, maybe some actual current events in the United States. So it's kind of all maybe like tying together in a way that I'm really enjoying.
I think my expectations grew coming up to the release of this, simply because once they announced that they were bringing back a Daredevil show, and it was announced that it wasn't going to really be a continuation of the Netflix shows, it was all separate, it was going to be like 18 episodes long at like 25-30 minutes an episode. We were like, god damn, I'm going to be covering this for like 4 months every single week. And then obviously like Kevin Feige and Bob Iger sort of retook over doing all the main Marvel stuff, and they basically looked at it and went, what are you doing with this show? They decided to make the Netflix shows canon to the MCU. They basically fired a bunch of the writers and brought back some of the original ones, some guys from I think from the Punisher series to do the writing. They went, how do you not have Foggy and Karen in the original cast back? They said, right, we're bringing all them back as well. And that's when my expectations rose. Because we basically went through like the Hawkeye series, for example, not knowing if this was the same Kingpin that we saw in the Netflix shows, or if this was a different iteration. It seemed like it might be a different iteration because he seemed incredibly strong and powerful in his fight with Kate Bishop, and so that seemed to maybe be a different Kingpin. And so all the questions up in the air, and then they went, nope, it is all going to be canon, all the stuff, so it's going to be the same characters coming back. We've not really had, I guess, the holes filled in with what happened in the last, like, 7 odd years. Cause I think 2018 was the last time we had season 3. The rumour being that Matt Murdock was one of the ones dusted in the snap. And so he's been absent for a while, which is why the likes of Kingpin have been allowed to flourish. Obviously, we got the Daredevil cameo in She-Hulk. Matt's been getting around as well.
But that hasn't happened yet. Right? The time, I think, sorry, not to throw a wrench in your recap here, but I think the She-Hulk thing has not happened in what we've seen from episodes 1 and 2 of the new show.
I think it may have done, because Matt was being Daredevil. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, we're going to talk about Foggy dies at the start of this episode. We're going to get into that in a minute. But basically, he's obviously being Daredevil up to that point, and then he stops, and then after the title scene, we get the 1 year later bit that pops up on the screen, where he hasn't been Daredevil for the last year. That almost felt like the snap in itself when it went to, like, in Endgame, when it was like 5 years later, and you're like, shit, this big event just happened, and then there was, but obviously for Daredevil, it's like 1 year later, so I think the stuff with She-Hulk, because She-Hulk came out, a couple of years ago now, so I kind of think that did happen before Foggy got killed, and he was being Daredevil then. Because I think he's had all these different suits stacked away. What I'm hoping to see in the next episode is that, because he's going to go back to being Daredevil, is that he walks into a room in his apartment and he's got all the suits lined up. And that shot we saw in the trailer where it had like the 5 different masks or whatever, including the gold one that we see in She-Hulk. I think he's got that, or that's going to be all lined up there. So I mean, it's not confirmed yet, so it is just speculation. But I believe, if you think in the timeline of things, that if 1 year later kind of brings us up to the present day, then the She-Hulk incident has probably already happened. And the other thing that makes me think that weirdly as well is that it's mentioned in here that Karen had gone off to live in San Francisco, and that's where She-Hulk was, where he went. So I think maybe that had already happened as well, because if he was in San Francisco, he would have probably gone to try and see Karen. Not that they were going to talk about it much, but that was just my thinking anyway. None of it's canon. It's all just head canon right now.
We don't know yet. And I was just basing that off of, the color of the cowl. The color of the cowl. Because obviously it's a different suit when he goes and sees She-Hulk. And I was hoping, we're jumping too far ahead, but I was hoping we get to see that made by Buzzsaw, but we'll probably talk more about that later.
Let's get into the start of this episode. I mean,
I don't wanna.
The first 15 minutes of this episode, where we basically get the nostalgia of Foggy, Matt, and Karen together. They're in Josie's bar. Great to see Josie's bar back, and even the same actress playing Josie as well. And then the whole thing, we get to see a great sort of reinterpretation of Matt's echolocation, where he sort of pinpoints that something's going on, and you see it sort of zoom into him, then zoom out, and then zooms in on Foggy, where he's like able to focus his hearing like that. So that was, I thought, a good mark. And we see that something's wrong, and we see him get into his Daredevil suit, and he's... I don't know, I didn't like the CGI of him swinging across the rooftop and running. It was a little bit dodgy.
Yeah,
it looked like it was like looked like the frame rate had dropped a little bit somewhere. Yeah. It was a bit janky, but we do that great shot of when he sort of goes down and then he's just sort of standing outside the church in the suit. That was sort of a really good like comic book shot. And then obviously it turns out the Bullseye's around. Don't know how he's got loose, because he killed a bunch of people in season 3 of Daredevil, and he should have been locked up. So maybe he's escaped somehow. He's obviously recovered from being paralysed from his back injury, and maybe that surgery that you saw in the post-credit scene of episode 3 worked. Series 3, sorry. And obviously he takes a shot at Foggy. And then ensues a fight. And then ensues a fight between Bullseye and Daredevil. The first part of that fight, again, like when they're downstairs in the bar, I didn't think was great, because the punches and the kicks looked fake. Like you could see almost the distance between the fist being thrown in the face. So it was a bit rough, but then they almost sort of like pay homage to the hallway scenes from previous Daredevil series, where they almost tried to do like the one shot up the stairs to the rooftop, which was nice. Right. And then I did like the rooftop battle between them. And Matt constantly listening in for Foggy's heartbeat, which he hears, and then obviously Foggy dies, his heartbeat stops, and what I thought was almost a great portrayal of Bullseye, and the fact that like they're on that edge of the rooftop, and Matt's screaming at him like, why? And because Bullseye's a psychopath, he just doesn't even give him an answer, he just laughs in his face. Yep. And then Matt, so I'm shocked, first of all, that I'm already jawed to the ground, because Foggy's died in the first 15 minutes of bringing him back, and then Matt throws Bullseye off the roof to effectively kill him, or try to kill him anyway, which is just not what Daredevil does. No. And so I don't think I've watched the first sort of opening 10-15 minutes of any MCU show and had my jaw on the ground like I did in this one.
Yep. Yeah, same. I mean, I really hate Bullseye. I hate the character, but they make him so hateable. I really like in the previous series that we had years ago, and in this one, I was like, I really don't want this guy to be. How does he keep coming back? Like, he's just so awful. And how did he survive? And how is he not paralyzed? And how is he out in the streets? And why is he there? He's just the worst. And of course it's him that causes all of this. Like, it just doesn't feel good, obviously. And then to bring Foggy back, who's probably my favorite character in these series, and then I should have known. Like, I did not anticipate, like you said, my jaw was on the floor. I did not anticipate this happening. But I feel like, in retrospect, should have known the way they rolled through the first, 5 minutes or so. where they're leaving the law firm and they're friends, and there's the most amazing moment where they're lined up on the street corner and Matt's like, the city finds a way to protect itself, and they all just stand there with like a wink and a nod to the camera, like, we're back. I loved that. I absolutely loved that scene. I loved that shot. And then it all gets taken away by this psychopath. So they did a really good job of making me like, be like, throw him off that roof. Like, Matt Murdock did exactly what I wanted him to do, I'm sorry to say, in that moment. And then when he wakes up from that, I'm like, come on, why? Just like Matt was yelling at him, like, why? Just stay down, man. And it's not fair that he gets up and Foggy does not.
I mean, yeah, when he hits the ground and we think that he's dead, as he probably should have been, I was like, wow, they really sort of grabbed Daredevil by the balls in terms of like killing off two returning characters in the opening scenes, essentially. But yeah, Foggy, I mean, there was a big theory going on that I was buying into of like, how was Frank Castle going to be brought back into this? And the theory running around was that by episode sort of 3 or 4, Karen was the one that was going to get killed. And because obviously Frank has a connection to Karen in his series as well as Daredevil, that basically Daredevil and Matt Murdock wants the people that killed Karen dead. And he can't do it himself because he won't cross that line. So he goes to Frank to do it. And Frank gets drawn back in and does it for him, essentially. That was the big theory going on. So I was always bagging on one of them definitely dying. I did not see it being Foggy, and I did not see it happening in that first 10 minutes. So, goddamn. Kudos to them, though, for having the balls to do that, because I just didn't see it happening.
Yeah. I will also say, like, yes, it definitely felt like... It certainly felt like the choreography was not as good as it was in the original series. And I felt this way in the original series as well. Some of those fight scenes just go on too long for me personally. Like, they make their way all the way up those stairs. They keep like stabbing each other and getting knives thrown at each other and beating the crap out of each other. And they just end up going slower and slower because they're killing each other. And it just went on for so long that that kind of like brings me out of it a little bit. Some of the hallway scenes that they did in the original series do that, but not this long. It just felt a little bit too long, and it felt like the choreography was not as good as it was in the original series. So those were two maybe more outside of the story things that kind of impacted my viewing at that moment. But I was still like, my palms were sweaty, and I was like, can we just get this guy already? He really caused a big mess in the previous series. He's gotta go. And then he like goes to prison. So he's going to get out. Like, so obviously he's going to get out. So we're not done with him yet. And it's going to be infuriating. So he might get out, not to speculate this early on in our conversation, but who knows if he gets out and then goes after Karen. And that's why Frank Castle has to come back into the mix.
Maybe.
But, I'm just really going to hate that.
I mean, it's a fair question to ask, though, because it even rolls into my point of saying, of like, how was Bullseye even out in the first place? Because he was arrested at the end of season 3. He was having the surgery done on him, and he killed tens of people in season 3 of Daredevil. So there's every reason why he should be locked up now. And so, did he escape? And was free, and obviously it's taken him this long. Maybe he was dusted as well, and it's just, or maybe that's it. He was in prison, he got dusted, and when he's come back, he's out of prison now.
How did he know about Benny? Like, it definitely feels like there's someone larger at play here, because he knew about Benny, and then he figured out where Benny was, and then Kingpin later, maybe it's in episode 2, but pretty suspiciously, I think, says, I had nothing to do with that. Like, I'm sorry about your partner. I had nothing to do with it. So that makes me think that there is someone pulling the shots, to use a bullseye pun. But I don't know. But that's speculation. I also hate him. I hate the way he says, "Hey, Karen," when he's walking up to them. Everything about him is awful. Terrible.
I mean, we see obviously he gets in court. Matt testifies or gives a little speech anyway, and he gets sentenced. What was it? 11 people that he killed that night. So he was sentenced to consecutive life sentences. He's going to die in prison essentially, life without parole. But we know he's going to escape because we see other clips in the trailer where he's out. So we know that's going to happen. Again, it brings us to. We might as well just talk about the conversation between Matt and Karen after the court scene as well, where we discover Karen's moved to, or basically after Foggy's death, Matt shut down for a few weeks, didn't talk to her at all, which is probably fair enough. Like, his best friend in the whole world, the guy he's known since like college or whatever, has died. And like, I literally after that scene, I turned around to my wife and I said, again, like, because throughout all of Daredevil and whatever, Karen has always been very self-righteous and very on a high horse about things, and she seemed like straight back into that character, doing that again in this chat with Matt. Matt cut himself off for a few weeks, which I would think was probably fair enough. And what Matt Murdock's like. He disappeared after he almost got killed with Elektra and didn't contact you guys for months. So that's in his character to do. But then once he was ready to start talking again, she fucks off to San Francisco and lives there. And Matt's tried to contact her quite a bit, and she's never given in the time of day either. But she came back for the hearing, and she won't go and have a cup of coffee with them and just have a chat about stuff. And to me, it was the return of self-righteous Karen.
That's interesting. I was definitely on Karen's side here. I think, but because none of them have been good communicators throughout these shows.
Fair.
But also none of them are learning the lessons. Like a big point of the original series was like, we you don't have to do this alone. We can do this together. Stop keeping secrets from your friends. Like she got to know them over many years, and Foggy was a good friend of hers too. And Matt abandoned her in that moment. She didn't abandon him until he abandoned her and she left. And he ran away and hid himself away, like you said, like he did when he almost got killed, like he did a lot of times, without maybe, from my perspective, any concern for the people that were also impacted by Foggy's death. Yes, it's your best friend. You knew him since college. The Nelson versus Murdoch episode of the first season plays in my head rent free. Their relationship, Foggy and Matt's relationship, means a lot to me. I love that episode of television, but he didn't support Karen either. Like, I don't know why she moved all the way across the country, but I just was, it was very much like, it's very sad. It's very sad that this ended the friendship, but he did not, like, it's like he hasn't learned anything from what they tried to teach him in the first series about, like, not having to do everything on his own. So I was a little bit on Karen's side with all of that. Like, I definitely felt I would have been like, I would be the same. Like, no, I'm not going to get coffee with you. You weren't there for me. I found people that were there for me. I found my own outlet. So
yeah, but clearly she did, because Matt said, he's like, I know you're lying. I just don't know if you're lying to me or to yourself. Right. When he said no, sure. So she clearly did, but she's just like trying to distance herself still, which I guess you can understand a little bit.
It's only been a year, and she was the one down there, like, putting pressure on the wound, thinking that the body behind her was Matt's, not Bullseye's, That
was a great little detail as well, that you hear the body clunk and she's just like, oh my God. Yeah. It's like getting even worse.
Yeah.
And then turns around and sees, obviously, it's Bullseye, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just also amazing acting on her part. But very obviously horribly traumatic. She's like, her best friend is lying there bleeding out and she's keeping pressure on it. And he dies in her arms. And so, I mean, I get it. It's definitely like to write that into those characters probably takes, it's all just based on whoever's lived experiences, like, is writing that stuff. So it's very, I think, like, I would be surprised if there's not other people that relate to Karen in this situation.
And she gives him the little bit of, like, devil's horn that came off his helmet, which we didn't even mention that, like, before as the title scene drops, he drops his helmet over the side of the building and it rotates, and just where the horn's been cut off, it creates the D for Daredevil, which is quite a cool shot. I thought it was quite good.
I also going along with that a little bit is I also love that, like, the intro sequence is like the opposite of the original series intro, whereas the original series is like building up, like it's forming the city and Daredevil and stuff, and this one's like everything's crumbling down. I thought that was a pretty cool little thing as well.
And so in this episode, we see now after a year that he has created a new law firm, with Kirsten McDuffie, so Murdoch and McDuffie, and they seem to be doing pretty well. They seem to have quite a few people working for them. And they've also got their PI / enforcer, who is the now retired cop Cherry, who obviously goes to the rooftop and sees that Matt is Daredevil. And this is where I want to bring in a question for you, and it's also going to tie into a question we've got from Clan Mandalorian, which we'll get to in a moment. But in terms of the rumor of the Defenders coming into season 2, if you're going to hire a PI enforcer for your law firm, why would you not go and get Jessica Jones?
Yeah, that's a good question. And obviously, so I don't remember Cherry at all from the original series.
He wasn't in it.
If he was in it at all. But he's obviously got like Matt and the whole team, Murdoch, Nelson, Page, have a relationship with this. Like, they're at his retirement party. So there's obviously a relationship there. I also think that the Defenders don't like necessarily like each other. I also think that Matt Murdock, I mean, there's so much going on with the vigilante registration and all of that stuff, and he's trying to put that life behind him. But he knows that Jessica Jones is a loose cannon. There's no like, she's not particularly, I don't want to say not reliable, but certainly not always safe. So I think that there's, I think that it kind of makes sense that he doesn't have her number on speed dial for those reasons. And he goes with a cop that he trusts, that he has a relationship with, that he knows the system well enough to do all of this work. And he's not going to like send Cherry in to get the informant, worried that he's going to like kill somebody or, break some bones or anything.
All right, I'll give you that one. But it just seemed to make sense to me that if you're going to have someone who's a PI who you know is going to get results, and then you can have as a little bit of muscle at the same point, considering Matt Murdock and Jessica Jones seem to have a pretty good chemistry relationship during the Defenders as well. So to me, it was just like, if I was doing that, surely she'd be the one that you would call to be your enforcer. Obviously, I guess, Cherry's seen his secret identity now, and he knows who he is, and there's trust there. So, but yeah, it still made to me, I was like, would have been a good point to have a cameo in there of like Jessica Jones sort of coming in and out of the series a little bit, just being as a PI. So, brings on. I mean,
we might get an answer. We might get an answer in the show. We don't. But I mean, anything could have happened to her in the past, however many years it's been. There's lots of variables there. Like I said, I get it, and maybe you don't want to take away from these episodes were very specifically about like the trauma and grief and that Daredevil is facing, and so like putting in a cameo in the first episode might have taken away from that maybe a little bit. But maybe we'll get an answer. Maybe she'll be like, why didn't you call me? And be like, because you punch holes in buildings. Like, we don't need that.
We'll just divert slightly and throw in the question from Clan Mandalorian then, since we were talking about potential cameos. He says, will there be any other big cameos you guys expect to see in this series?
All right. I don't expect to see this, but I also, like, Jessica Jones, maybe we don't need her. What I don't understand that we haven't seen from either side of the MCU here is Spider-Man. Like, if there is anyone to team up with Daredevil, or for Daredevil to like seek out, I feel like it should be Spider-Man, and I have felt that way since we were introduced to Tom Holland's Spider-Man in Civil War, when he says that he had to make his helmet the sensory deprivation, his mask like sensory deprivation, because it helps cancel out all the noise. And I was like, well, there's no one better to teach you how to specifically hone your senses than Matt Murdock Daredevil. So I really think we could do well with a little Spider-Man cameo. It's a street level thing. And also, have you been watching Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man?
It's on my list. I've not got around to it yet.
So Daredevil makes an appearance in Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and I believe the voice actor of it in that is Charlie Cox that plays Daredevil. I'm pretty sure, fact check me, whatever. I didn't look it up because I was just like, oh, that's him, because it sounds like him. So I don't know. I mean, there's always been that connection there between like the street level New York heroes, and I would love we do get mention of Spider-Man in
we do.
Daredevil Born Again. But I don't know. It would be cool to see. I think it makes so much sense. I'm so surprised we haven't connected that yet, but that's my thing.
Your co-host has brought up a point that I was about to mention, that basically it was revealed by one of the Marvel execs over the last week or two, that they don't have the rights to use Spider-Man in TV shows that are longer than 30 minutes. So if the episode, it doesn't matter how big his doesn't matter how big his cameo is. The cameo could be a minute long, but if the episode itself is over 30 minutes, then they can't use him.
That's fine. Write a shorter episode. Throw him in a shorter episode.
Make it 29 minutes long.
Put him in there.
Throw him there.
29, 59. We get Spider-Man.
So that is the official reason. They said that animated doesn't count. They can use them and animated however they want. But in terms of live action, if an episode is over 30 minutes, they can't use them in there, unfortunately, which is so stupid. It's absolutely correct. But it's obviously part of the deal that they've made, that Sony don't want him appearing in those things. They don't want him to make the big bucks in the big films, I guess. So, which I guess is their prerogative, is the rights holder to the character. But it kind of just fucks with the MCU a bit, because he would be perfect for it. And it's going to be a shame that we probably never going to get that, to be fair. So, but let's turn then to the man that you mentioned who did drop the name drop of Spider-Man almost, really, which is Kingpin himself. So we see him in this episode. I think a lot of people question, or I've seen questioning about, why is he going for the mayor position? Why has he had this change of heart? Because we see him, he still obviously holds that aura, because he walks into a meeting of Vanessa and the five families where they respect the money that she's making, but he walks in, doesn't even say a word to any of them, just says the word Vanessa, and they all get up and leave. So he's still got that aura about him because it's Kingpin. And he tells her that he's going for the mayor's position. He's got the signatures. He wants to make a difference in the city. And we do see that kind of a bit throughout his scenes once he obviously wins the election and becomes mayor. We're going to get to a few finer points about that. I think people forget, though, that in the Echo series, he had a transformative experience at the end of that series. Whatever, I can't remember the exact weird powers that obviously she was imbued with in that finale episode, but he was basically seeing the kind of person that he could be, the impact he could have, and almost taking some of his pain away that he's had for years and years, and he's become a bit of a different person now. I think people do forget that, or they haven't even watched Echo, so wouldn't even know that that's what he's gone through. And because we see bits where Matt's saying about him, he's like, if I didn't know him better, if I didn't know him as I do, I'd almost say he's being sincere, or he sounds sincere, which kind of feeds into this thing that he has changed a little bit. I think we do see through episode 2 that maybe he still hasn't quite, because we see a bloodied fist at one point. He's blackmailing the police commissioner to stay on. He's not quite changed yet, just Kingpin. But your thoughts on him through these 2 episodes?
Yeah, I think he also, I think he's also there, allowing Vanessa and the five families to continue operating, even though he's mayor of New York. He's going to continue to have the income stream from the criminal underworld, or the criminal world in New York. So he's not exactly on the up and up. And those comic booky situations where the character sees their greatest potential the villain sees their greatest potential for good never goes correctly from what I've seen, with the exception of Lex Luthor in All-Star Superman, my favorite comic book. So, yeah, I'm not buying it. I also, I'm living in a place and a time where people running for office, there's, he's a criminal. He's running for office. That doesn't really, I don't know if he has changed. And like you said, there's a lot in, especially episode 2, where we're seeing, he's still a bad guy. And just because he wants to like register vigilantes, and what people on the streets say about him, like the reason that they are supporting him are not good reasons. Like he has the votes, but they're not good reasons, like the essence of the word good. So yeah, I have no faith that he's a changed person, whether that is like part of some nefarious plot that he has now, or whether something is going to trigger him into, like, we're seeing Daredevil's trigger or Matt Murdock's trigger going back to Daredevil. If we're going to see Kingpin's trigger in a future episode or something. Whether Vanessa ends up saying, listen, I don't want to go to couples therapy anymore. And he's like, hulks out because of that or whatever. We'll see. I don't trust him. I don't think he's in it for good. I don't think he'd make a good mayor of New York. But he's saying all the right stuff. He's saying the very New York, like, we're tough. We're New Yorkers. We're tough. Why do we want someone running around in a spider outfit kind of stuff? So I don't know. He's got the rhetoric down.
I've got a theory about this, because there's going to be a point, I think, where he does snap and he almost returns to the Kingpin of old. And we've already seen, his marital troubles. They're going to therapy. She's not been seen by his side since he got elected mayor. And there's obviously what is implied that she was cheating on him as well with this Adam dude. And I'm assuming he beat the crap out of him already, because we see him sat at his desk with a bloodied fist. And I thought that was maybe what it was implied. That because she was like, don't kill him. And he's like, I promise. But it doesn't mean I can't beat the shit out of him. I've got a theory that what makes him snap is that something happens between him and Vanessa, and he actually kills Vanessa through rage and snaps and does that. So my predictions are normally rubbish, but I'm banking that this is a big one for me, that he's going to kill Vanessa at some point. I don't think she makes it out of this series.
No,
and that's
I don't think so either.
He carries on to be somehow stays on as the mayor, but he snaps and goes back to sort of a little bit of his old ways, because they're not completely gone. You can't obviously change everything about you just from a lifetime of what you've been doing just because of some vision you were shown or healed a little bit of pain. You're gonna have those instincts to still carry on as you've always been. So yeah, I think he kills Vanessa later on in the series. But what did you reckon to the chat that we saw a little bit in the trailer? Obviously, we see the full scene now. The diner chat between Matt and Kingpin here, because I loved that little chat. And he's like, I've got to admit, it's not entirely pleasant to see you. And it's like, that's interesting, considering he's kicked the shit out of you a few times and you tried to kill him multiple times.
Yeah, which essentially Matt says.
yeah, he does. He's like, oh, you've tried to kill me a few times. He's like, as of you, and he's like, no, incarcerate maybe, but kill never. That's not the line I cross. And then interestingly, that Matt's just like, look, I'm keeping an eye on you, and Kingpin just takes the high road, and he's like, look, if your alter ego decides to ever come out, he's like, I will come for you. So just leave me alone, and do you, and I'll do me, and let's just stay each other's way. But what did you reckon to this chat between them? Because it was bigged up in the trailer, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed this, that moment in that diner, and that they also share the moment of missing Becky's diner, which was brought up in the beginning of the first episode. A year prior, with the friend group talking about, did you hear Becky's diner is closing? And so now we get to see, like, they all know, like, they're both a little bit the same. right? They're like Hell's Kitchen, Becky's Diner. I miss it. Yeah, I loved that little connection. And I loved the stay in your lane. Like, you stay in your lane and I'll stay in our current lanes, right? You stay in the lane of mayor and don't be a criminal. And I'll stay in the lane, my lane as Matt Murdock lawyer, and I won't don the suit. And everything will be, you want to make New York good, then make New York good. And I won't need to put the suit on. I loved all of that. I thought that was great. Very tense. I was waiting for like a shoe to drop somewhere, but now I really like the way that played out. Good writing, good acting.
It's what sat at the heart of the Daredevil series for so long, isn't it? These two just facing off each other. And I know that, what was it, the director or something came out and said there isn't going to be as much talking in this series as there was in the previous ones. It's going to be more action, a bit less talking, but we're going to keep the theme there of the darkness and stuff like this. And I'm like, and I know you're setting up the series, but there was still a lot of talking in these first 2 episodes, considering they said there wasn't going to be as much.
Yeah.
And then we've got the other side of these 2 episodes where we've got the introduction to White Tiger and Hector in his situation. So, I mean, R.I.P. Kamar De Los Reyes, who unfortunately obviously passed away after filming the series, and we see the little tribute to him at the start of episode 2, I think it was. But yeah, we obviously haven't really seen any proper White Tiger action. We've really seen like through CCTV footage. I can't wait to see properly that whole White Tiger suit. But interesting that obviously he intervenes in like a couple of cops, dirty cops perhaps. One of them accidentally gets killed. He's arrested and beaten shit up, and obviously Matt comes in and goes, "I'm taking your case," and that whole situation sort of revealed. And even obviously going on to what happens then at the end of episode 2, which we'll get on to, because I want to talk about that as a whole separate thing, because that's obviously a big thing. But the White Tiger situation, what are you reading into this one?
I love this. Okay, so Brandon earlier asked what other cameos we want, and I said, maybe not bringing in any heavy hitters to take away immediately, but I love this introduction of a new group, right? Like, White Tiger is a very cool character. I love the mystical amulet thing. I love this actor. I think this actor is also like perfectly cast. And yeah, I can't wait to see more. And I think this was a really, again, an interesting way to introduce the character, and a very politically charged way to introduce this character from like a real world audience perspective. You're stopping these corrupt cops from beating up on this guy, and an accident happens, but then, they're dirty cops and they're framing you and they're beating the crap out of you in the interrogation room. So I like the way that they've tied it into Matt Murdock's world, and I really can't wait to see. I hope we get to see White Tiger in action, like you're saying, just not on the CCTV footage. It's not looking good. Like, his case is not looking good right now. But hopefully Matt Murdock can like get him off, and we can see a team up or something there.
I don't see how you introduce the character of White Tiger and not have him in some action scenes.
I agree. And we're only 2 episodes in, but as of right now, it's not looking good for White Tiger being able to be out on the streets. But yeah,
I think he's going to be okay. I think Matt's going to do his thing. Before we chat about the end of episode 2 then, which obviously ties into the White Tiger story, but let's just talk about the new love interest, Heather Glenn, the therapist we see throughout this. I think one of my favourite comments I saw this week actually was the fact that she said that this is my first ever blind date, and someone commented by saying, "But hasn't every date that Matt's been on a blind date?" That's just like that was
brutal.
Kind of amusing to me.
That's brutal. Also, he sees a world on fire, so not necessarily.
But yeah, either way, for like it was a blind comment. I thought it was
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
amusing,
yeah.
to be fair. They've taken interest in each other. It turns out she's a therapist. We see her releasing a book, which I believe we also have likely now seen the character of Muse, who we know is going to be obviously one of the big bad guys. He seems to be that guy that was like, "I need your help," and she's like, "Email
Yeah,
me."
the younger kid. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very likely scenario. Obviously, the guy who's like the right hand man of Kingpin was there as well. He's going to have some weird part to play in all this. I think they're leaning onto him a bit too heavily for that not to be something that they're going to touch. She had an interesting book that she was releasing. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but it seemed to be a play on The Man Without Fear, like the Daredevil comic title. I think it was like a Way Without Fear or something.
Right. Yes.
Or How to Be a Man Without Fear or something like that. Anyway, it's just a play on the comic book title, which was quite cool. And then the fact that she cancels dinner with him because she's got a new client, and it turns out to be Fisk and Vanessa. We obviously see in the trailer as well that they're hooking up later down the line. So she's going to have a bit of a role to play. She is a comic book character as well, which was interesting. And until I looked it up, I'd never really heard of her. But Matt gets around. He's been getting around in the MCU, even if it is over the course of like the last 10 years. But Matt's been getting himself around there. So what do you reckon to the new love interest, I should say?
I like her a lot. I like this character a lot. And similar, like I've never really read any solo Daredevil comic books. Team ups, yes. But never any solo stuff. So I'm not super aware of any of these like extra characters like her. But I mean, I like her a lot. I think she also plays a part in The Acolyte, which I also really love. And so, yeah, I like her. I think like I'm really afraid for Matt to ruin it by being like, you need to tell me about Kingpin, and for her to be like, I can't divulge, that. And he's going to like not care about her like privacy in order to try to get information from her. That's what I am thinking.
Oh, okay.
And
Sorry,
so
I looked up who she was in The Acolyte.
Yeah,
Mother Coral.
Coral, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't realize that was her. Fair.
Yeah. So, yeah, I really like her. I think they've got great like chemistry. Again, I think the casting comes out really well, and I'm excited to see what happens yet. And I'm not excited to see Matt ruin it all.
Fair. Absolutely fair. He's got a history of doing that, hasn't he? So
yeah.
Let's get then to the end of this episode, which is, do we say the return of Daredevil or what will come of this? So he obviously goes off. They find the guy that escaped from the subway that White Tiger was saving. Matt goes on there. He gets him to leave because the cops show up. One of the ones that didn't die on the night, and another cop show up. And Matt's being his sort of cheeky, smarmy self a little bit. He's like smiling there. He's like, "Oh, do you want me to tell you which way he went? Because I'm visually impaired. I can't really tell you that."
I love that so much.
And they give him a beating. And there was a very focused moment where basically they focus on the blood dripping out of his mouth onto the floor to basically, I guess, just showing leaving his DNA at the scene.
Yeah.
And then they pull the gun on him, and Matt's on his knees going, "No, you don't want to do this. Don't do this. You don't want to do this." And I feel he was just as much talking to himself as he was to them.
Yeah.
Because he's been a year without an incident. And then obviously he goes nuts. He goes absolutely fucking nuts on them, kicks the shit out of him, looking very much like he actually kills them here. And then
that was a brutal moment where we hear that guy's like neck crack. Hopefully they're not dead.
Well, I mean, the episode ends with him basically like having a losing his shit and just screaming. Yeah. So this is why I'm like, this is the return of Daredevil. He's going to start donning the suit again in the next episode. I wonder why as well, because we've seen in some of the trailers where he does catch up with Frank Castle, and Frank's like, "Well, you've crossed the line now, haven't you? You can't go back after this." And I wonder if this is that moment that they talked about where he has accidentally, or just through sheer brute force and just maybe he wasn't thinking about it because he was in a massive adrenaline rush, that he has killed these cops, and that's a line now that he's crossed and he can't go back from, and that's what Frank's talking about. But This was an epic ending. I actually liked this fight scene, even if it was quite quick. It was brutal. It was everything you want to see, kind of really, in this kind of ending to get Daredevil back on track in a way.
Yeah, I was very much like, oh, don't do this, Matt. Don't do this right now. Just be the lawyer. You have them. You have them. Like, they're screwed if you can make it out of this situation. Like, just just put your phone on the counter and take audio or video or something. Come on. But yeah, no, he flips out, and this is definitely looking like it's the return of him to Daredevil. I'm hoping we get an episode of him dealing with this and not just going back straight to the suit, because we do have to fight for White Tiger in court. So if we have like Matt Murdock under investigation of murder of these cops, that, I mean, maybe his lawyer partner will be able to take over the case, but a case that she didn't even want to begin with. But yeah, I hope that they're not dead just for the sake of this just for the sake of like Matt Murdock's character. Like, I don't necessarily really, I mean, like I said, I have no expectations, but there are story elements that I personally would like to see them follow that really would get messed up by this being a thing now. But if, I am looking forward to him like uncovering whatever's going on in the police force here. I also want to talk about that one cop's tattoo.
Yeah, I did kind of miss that in terms of like mentioning it just then. So go for it.
I think that
Frank is not going to be happy.
No, and that's another very real world thing that's going on right now with people adopting Frank Castle's symbol, thinking that it means something that it does not mean. And so I really loved seeing that in this show, even though they filmed this show whenever they filmed it, a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever filming of this show was. But these dirty cops have adopted the Punisher symbol and tattooed it on their bodies. And I can't wait to see the fallout from that. I can't wait to see what comes from that. Yeah, Frank Castle's reaction to that. That is something I'm very excited to see the fallout over. So let's get Matt Murdock out of there. I hope they're not dead. Let's get him away from being a cop killer, and let's focus on, they've like usurped Punisher's symbol to mean something that it does not mean. And I want to see the fallout from that.
Yeah, I think obviously, they find the cops at the apartment, they find Matt Murdock's DNA, but he can, if they are dead, for example, because it was always that thing of like, if he's visually impaired, how could he ID the cops that were beating him up? Because theoretically he maybe couldn't. But at the same point, like, he could always say, well, you found my DNA at the scene because I went to go and see the guy who obviously lived there, who escaped, and he punched me and ran away, and that's why my blood's on the floor.
Or these other people showed up and punched me and ran away, and I defended myself as best I could. Whatever. You're right.
But there was just a way for him to basically not have said he wasn't there when the cops were there. He showed up to the other guys, they hit him, and that's why his blood's on the floor, and he's got nothing to do with the cops there. But yeah, I want to see Frank go fucking apeshit over dirty cops using his symbol as a means of inspiration for them, which he said is real world implications because it's being done anyway in the real world in America. But yeah, Frank Castle ain't going to stand for this. And maybe that's what draws him up the woodwork in the end, is the fact that like he's like, I'm not having this, so I'm going to come out and fucking put an end to this bullshit. I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see the Punisher in general. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge Punisher fan. It's one of the. I mean, I've got like 9 tattoos, and one of them, my actual biggest one is the Punisher tattoo I got, where I've got the Punisher done as a Sith Lord. Yeah. So I've got the Punisher done with a red lightsaber and shit. So I can't wait to see Frank Castle show up in this series.
Yep. Same. I want to ask you. Nice. I love that. I do want to ask you one last question if we're getting ready to wrap up here, since we've reached the end of the episode. Do you think Foggy Nelson is dead?
Wow, this is a question I've been asked a few times over the last week, simply because there is a story from the comics where he fakes his own death and comes back later. But in the comics, as we know, like, you never really die. You always come back to life, really.
Yeah. I think
it's a hard one because
I was just going to say, I think there's somewhat the idea that Bullseye might have been hired to take them out. And if that's the thinking, then they fake his death and he goes into witness protection or something. And, whatever could be there, I think is maybe like a get out of jail free card as that would be. I'm kind of okay. Like I said, he's like one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character. So,
I mean, the only way it happens is if obviously like the ambulance arrives just after, like, because obviously Matt hears his heart stop beating, and so we know his heart stopped. And the only way is that the ambulance arrives right after we see that last bit of scene where like Karen's with him, and he's put in the ambulance to go off to hospital, and they manage to revive his heart in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. But he's like, in order to keep them safe and stuff, he basically says, "Don't let them know I'm still alive," and he manages to, like you said, go into witness protection or keep himself safe or something like that, and he will reappear. Because part of me was like, I find it hard to believe that Kevin Feige would walk in, fire the previous writers, and tell them they were idiots for not bringing back the original characters, and bring it back just to have him killed off in the first 10 minutes. That's I just found that a little bit hard to believe. But at the same point, I was thinking, if you want to make it impactful and cross a line for Matt that he struggles to come back from, then that is what you needed to do. 100%. So it's so hard because I can see it going either way. I'd be pissed off if they brought him back, actually, because I don't like playing that red herring sort of scenario. Because it's a trope it's done too often now, and they would need a bloody good reason for Foggy to have done that and disappear. And not have come back. We know Matt's obviously been presumed dead and he hasn't contacted him for months, but that's Matt. He's got his own way of doing it. I don't expect Foggy to act like that. But you lose the impactfulness. I wouldn't be able to rewatch this series if later on in the series he comes back to life, and then I'm rewatching this series like 6 months down the line. It's not going to have the same impact knowing that he comes back to life, or he comes back and he's not actually dead. So you lose the impactfulness that scene has already had. Excuse me, I'm not getting emotional, don't worry. You just lose that impactfulness that he has, that you've already had, if you bring him back to life. So, to me, now you killed him, he has to stay dead.
Sure. Fair. I want him to come back. I mean, maybe to your point earlier about it being silly for Kevin Feige to have fired everybody and then brought these characters back. Maybe he did that just because he hates Foggy Nelson. Maybe it's his least favorite character in Marvel, and he was like, if anyone's going to kill him, it's going to be me. And he wrote it this way. Who knows? We need to know more about Kevin Feige. But yeah, I think there's a potential there for it to be like somebody's out to get these guys, or somebody's out to get Foggy, and he goes under, in witness protection or something. But I do agree, then on the rewatch, that is much less impactful. But we can also like put ourselves in the shoes of the characters, because it is impactful for them, because they do believe that he's dead. But no, I definitely get what you're saying. But come back to us, Foggy.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason I don't necessarily think about or have bought into the whole thing of someone's maybe hired Bullseye to do that and they're targeting them is because you're then adding maybe an extra layer to a story that's already going to be convoluted and packed, because you've got Daredevil's story on his own and what's going on with him, what goes on with Karen, the Kingpin element into that with him and his interactions with Daredevil and Vanessa and that side of it. They're already juggling a criminal empire and the mayorship. What's going on with Frank Castle coming back into it. We've got Jack DeQuanza, who's the swordsmith from the Echo in Hawkeye series, coming into it later down the line.
Do we
the
know
whole issue with what? Sorry.
Do we know if Buzzsaw is officially coming back? I didn't check the casting list to see if that guy is on it.
No, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think so. Not from what I can see, anyway.
Sad.
But then you add on to that as well the fact that you've got the White Tiger storyline, you've got the Muse storyline.
Wow,
There's so much already that's going on in this, and you add on another storyline on top of that of someone's hired Bullseye or other mercenaries to take out Daredevil and his friends. It just seemed like it would be a bit too much, maybe to cover. If you wanted to belay that for season 2, then you can have that running, and it maybe brings Foggy coming back to life more impactful actually, and better to have it done in season 2 and believe for quite some time that he's dead. That's the only way I would buy into it. Apart from that, I think there's so much already going on in season 1, and I say only 7 episodes left, but it just feels like they go by so quickly.
And there's just so much, like you're saying. Yeah, there's just a ton to fit in there.
Any last thoughts about these 2 episodes before we wrap up?
I really enjoyed this. I had a blast watching the episodes and a blast talking to you about the episodes, but I am so glad this show is back. Like the premiere exceeded my expectations. It feels the same as it did back then. It's really exciting to be getting something like this coming back in Marvel.
Absolutely. Whether people want to go dip in and out over the last couple of years of saying Marvel's back because this is amazing, then Marvel's crap because this has been rubbish. Whatever. I just think Daredevil personally is one of the top notch shows, and whilst you can always say it maybe wasn't really Marvel originally because it was Netflix that did it, the theme of it and their story obviously lives on, so it's not going to really matter who did it and who didn't do it. It's the fact that Daredevil's back. We've got reason to be happy, and I can't wait to see what happens in the rest of this series, to be fair.
Same.
Jerry, I absolutely have loved having this chat with you. I really appreciate you coming on to do this. I know we normally chat Star Wars, but you were one of the first thoughts I had was like, I know Joey's going to be watching this. I know he's going to want to chat about it. So I really appreciate you coming on. Tell everybody at home exactly where we can find the Krypton To Alderaan podcast and your social medias.
Sure thing. And yeah, thanks, Andy. This was great. I had a blast talking about this, and it's got me amped up for more Marvel. You could Krypton To Alderaan, any social media. I do most of the social media on Instagram these days. But definitely hit us up, subscribe to us on YouTube. We've got Andor coming up, so we'll be, putting out weekly episodes about Andor. So check us out, subscribe if you like Star Wars and you don't want to miss that.
It's weird because we've got Star Wars coming up in about 5-6 weeks time, whatever it is. And I've been in such a Marvel bubble recently, I've almost forgotten a little bit about Star Wars because we don't have a lot of Star Wars content really at the moment. And even really, Andor's the only big Star Wars thing we're getting this year, isn't it? I know next year we got Mandalorian and Grogu and everything coming after that. And we might, if we're lucky, get another Visions or maybe a Tales of the whatever later on this year. Because lastly, they only announced it 2 weeks before it dropped, didn't it? So they dropped a surprise trailer and went, oh, by the way, this is coming out in 2 weeks' time. So we might get some animated stuff later in the year, but Andor been the only big thing. So yeah, I've been stuck in a Marvel bubble because me and the wife, we've been rewatching all the MCU films as well. And obviously Captain America came out recently. We've got Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four coming out later on this year. So yes, I've been stuck in a Marvel bubble. I'm almost not been stuck in a Star Wars bubble, which is incredibly rare for me. But nice.
Krypton To Alderaan. Yeah, Krypton To Alderaan might have to pivot if we don't get more Star Wars stuff this year. I don't know what we're going to do.
I mean, there's always stuff you can chat about with Star Wars, even
That's
if it's
true.
just lore, raw theories, or anything. So we're never short of a few Star Wars chats, to be fair. So, but thank you very much, buddy. I really appreciate you jumping on this week to have that chat with us. I'll be back next week with more Daredevil, and obviously the following weeks after. I'll have a few different guests here and there throughout the series. Andor, as we said, coming in April. Then we're going to have some fun weeks where I've got to find some content to fit in, as we already mentioned in the weeks between that. And it's going to be really a busy summer as well. I mean, there's some big blockbusters coming out in the summer. If you've got anything that's piqued your fancy, I mean, we know we've got Thunderbolts coming out in May. We've got Ironheart. The series comes out in June. I don't think anyone's even clocked that. I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. Then obviously we've got a big month of July where we've got Jurassic World Rebirth, Fantastic Four, and Superman.
Yeah. I say this with a little bit of reserve. I'm a huge Superman fan. It's Superman and Star Wars for me, and I have not had a good time with DC in several years, for live action at least. So I'm optimistic about this movie, and so that's probably the thing I'm most excited for. And I'm never gonna sit at home for Jurassic World. I'm just not. I know it's turned into something completely different than it was, but I will just keep paying money to see dinosaurs on a big screen. So those two things are my thing. I mean, I'm stoked for Fantastic Four and a lot of the Marvel stuff, but Superman's the top one for me, for sure.
Fair. Yeah, dinosaurs. I'll always be there.
Yeah,
I've got a young daughter who's got mostly dinosaur outfits. To be fair,
Love it.
I'm gonna make sure she loves dinosaurs. So I can't wait for that either. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in and chimed in during the episode. Royce, thank you for staying with us and supporting your co-host throughout the show. I guess next time I might have to invite the both of you on rather than just Jerry. I know because I've chatted to Jerry more often, I think so.
Yeah.
But thank you, buddy, for the comment. That was a great pod. And thank you for sticking with us, everyone, throughout it. Like I said, I'll be back next week. But as always, everyone, until next time,
the Force will be with you always.
Thanks for tuning in to the Galactic Core Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But until next time, go get your geek on.